Hello, Eric.
Hello?
Can you
Am I
hear
live
me?
already?
Yeah, already.
No.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
no, yeah. I'm just going to do a little introduction of you and the presentation that is about to come. So let me just stop it here.
Yeah, you can introduce me. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, so Larry is, oh, sorry, Eric, I can introduce Eric. So Eric, I'm sorry. So the talk is 2020, A Space Odyssey with Micronaut and Quarkus. Is that correct? If I'm not misreading it on my schedule, sorry. We had a deal with, we had a problem with other speakers, so that's why my scheduling was not updated. So Eric is a Java architect with more than 15 years of experience with Java experience, right? So
yes.
Working at Ordina JTech. So you can able to share screen, test it, and see. Let's see if it's working.
Let's see. Hold on for a sec. I'm trying to open the StreamYard thing right now.
Yeah, now okay.
Yeah. Okay, you can see me.
No, yeah, I'm just going to do a little introduction of you.
Yeah.
The presentation that is about.
Oh, oops.
Working.
Let's see. Hold on for a sec. I'm trying to open the StreamYard thing right now.
Yeah, now okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe a little introduction of you.
Yeah.
You have a mute. You have a delay. I mean, I would advise you to mute the Vineyard if you have it. I mean, the tab. You just have that. All right.
Yeah, I've muted that. I did mute that one, but let's see.
All right. So let me see if we can add it. So this is your screen. So you are able to share a presentation.
Okay. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, right. 2020 Space Odyssey with Micronaut and Quarkus. I'm really interested in this talk. I am a fan of the movie. So
Okay.
all of you. So I'm leaving the stage, and then afterwards we can have a Q&A for that.
Yeah.
So anytime you want to start.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. At the end of the session.
Right. If you wanted to take a Q&A at the middle, just let me know, and now I can share. I can read the questions.
For the Q&A or at the Pine AI tool, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know, because I had yeah. Okay. I'll do that. That'd be lovely. I really love it that way.
All right. So thank you, Eric. Nice session.
Okay. So I'll just wait 1 minute and 10 seconds, and I can begin, right? So, hello and welcome everyone to my session in the June track. It's called 2020, A Space Odyssey with Micronaut and Quarkus. This is more or less a recap of the session I did in Munich in November last year, and I've tried to add in the latest developments in Micronaut and Quarkus. So hopefully it'll be enjoying and refreshing for everyone. But well, this is my second presentation online. I'm still a bit unused to it. My previous presentation was in the senior track. I don't know if you've seen it, but in that case, thank you. Otherwise, I'd like to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Erik-Berndt Scheper. I work as a Java architect and codesmith at Ordina in the Netherlands. And Ordina JTech is the JTech-based subsidiary. And I personally heart Java conferences. And well, it's a bit of pity, of course, with all this Corona stuff that that we cannot have any live conferences anymore. But I'm really glad that I've been selected to speak here about Micronaut and Quarkus, and also about reactive messaging in my other presentation. Yeah, because there cannot be any real Q&A, live Q&A, I've decided to shorten the session a little bit, and hopefully at the end there should be ample time to answer any questions you've had. So please add them in the Q&A session in the Pine AI tool, and I'll come back to each and every question either in the session or afterwards. So that we at least get some of the interaction that we usually have at Java conferences. So I'm currently contracted by the Ministry of Justice and Security in the Netherlands. And I have a passion for machine learning, big data technologies, and also for reactive programming. So first of all, I'd like to start with a bit of history of Java space. So in 1992, which sounds like ages ago, although I was 20 at the time, sorry, we had Java J2 EE 1.2, which was really the first usable Java EE version. And I don't know who of you are from the same age, but we had all these horrors, deployment descriptors, EGB 2.x. I don't know if anyone reminds those, but there was just you had the proxies that you had to create, and interfaces that you had to implement. It was all horror. And anyone, maybe the Java server pages. Well, these things are really even worse than servlets. Fortunately, we've moved ahead from them, but I still remember them, and fortunately, I don't wake up at nightmare from them. And all these other horrors we used to have in the 1990s. And this took some time until 2004, when the AGB era ended, and we had Spring. And we had containerless services in 2012. And oh dear. But when you least expect it, I hope that the sound comes over. We had these new eras, Micronaut and Quarkus. And the first one that came along last year was Micronaut. And it was developed by the creators from Grails. And I remember Grails, which had this GORM, Grails ORM, which was used to hibernate under the cover, and was really an amazing piece of technology where you had finders. It was really nice. And Micronaut also had a couple of goals, of course. It was intended to provide all the necessary tools to build full-featured microservice applications. And of course, avoid the downsides of Spring Boot, and Grails. Because in Grails, well, although it worked, it was really difficult. At least I found it difficult because it was slow to start up. And also Spring and Spring Boot used to be slow to start up. So it featured fast startup and reduced memory. And it tried to minimize the use of proxies and reflection, which we all know from Spring, and which took all this long time to start up, but also the reflection that gives us the troubles with when you don't have compile time security anymore. So you can get runtime errors where you don't expect them. So that was Micronaut, which arrived. And shortly after that came Quarkus, which is developed by Red Hat. It had a couple of goals: to be container first and cloud native. That was the first thing that It was a cloud native, so K-native application. And it was intended to be imperative and reactive. Now, as I said, I like reactive programming, but it also supported imperative programming. And optimized for developer joy. Now, I really like that. So it's optimized actually for us, you know, not something that's optimized for someone else, but for our pleasure, which was just amazing. And I think the most important and valuable part of Quarkus is the extension system that's available to integrate frameworks. And it also minimizes the use of proxies and reflection. So basically, it sounds more or less the same, although this focus on developer joy, that was something that triggered me initially. And the container first and cloud native, that was not something that was introduced with Micronaut as, sorry about that, as one of its original goals. It just tried to learn from the past and not provide something new. Well, it's good, of course, to learn from the past. So let's just check this out. And how does this work then? When you want to start with a new application, so I mean, well, with Spring Boot, you have to Spring initialize a project. So you basically have to open start.spring.io, you enter the name, the features, and you download the resulting zip file. And then you unzip it and you run maven clean install or Gradle build, and you're good to go. You can also use the Spring Boot CLI. I don't know if anyone has used this CLI. When I investigated this, this was the first time I thought, hey, there is a Spring Boot CLI. Let's check this out. So I'm on Mac OS. I'm a Mac addict, Mac and Linux addict. So I use brew tab and then brew install to install the Spring Boot CLI. And then you can run Spring init -n, the name of the project, -g, which is the Maven group ID, and then I think you can also add -a for the artifact out, and then -d are the dependencies. So in this case, I want to add the Cloud Stream project, Kafka, and data MongoDB reactive to build a reactive application. And what you get then is basically the same. So it just uses the start.spring.io and gets the zip file from there. So, well, that was a bit of a disappointment for me. But hey, they have a CLI, and then, well, yeah. Well, it's basically nothing more than an interface to the Spring initializer website. Well, let's check this out with Micronaut too, because they also have a CLI. And you can install it on macOS using brew install Micronaut. And then you can use mn, which is the shorthand for Micronaut, create app. Well, with the demo, you can add the features, the type of test framing, so you can use JUnit or testng. As far as I know, you can use the build is Maven or Gradle. Then you don't have to add build is Maven. So the default is Gradle for Micronaut. And this creates the mn demo, which is basically the artifact name as a subdirectory. You can run Maven verify. So it automatically installs a Maven wrapper as a bonus too. Well, I think this is really an awesome CLI because you can also use it to add features. You can add all. It's really a CLI that helps in the sense that you can add classes and all sorts of things. So this is the useful CLI, contrary to the Spring Boot CLI, which is basically, as I said, just an interface to the Spring Initializer project. And is after that, it's not really much use anymore. Yeah. So Micronaut has a really awesome CLI. And when you want to get started with Quarkus, well, yeah, there's a couple of downsides too. There's no CLI available. You have to have Maven pre-installed, even if you want to create a Gradle project, which sounds a bit weird. But you can do it. Although the Gradle is still in preview in this stage, which is, I think 1.6 is currently the most is the latest Quarkus version. So you can run it like so with Maven and then use the Quarkus Maven plugin. You say create, which is the goal, and then you give it a group ID, an artifact ID, class name, and a pass. This is basically for a reactive application, or a standard RESTful application that creates a REST resource. And you can run it. And you can also list the extensions that are available, and there are quite a lot of them actually. That is something that I really enjoy with Quarkus, is the amount of extensions, and I'll come back to that later. So you can use this the Quarkus plugin also to add extensions. So in this case, I wanted to add the small RAI reactive messaging. I want to add the Kafka extension, Mutiny, which is the reactive messaging, the follow-up to the reactive streams operators project, which was also implemented by small RAI, but they've now added a new version which they call Mutiny. And I've also added the MongoDB client extension. You can run it, Maven compile Quarkus dev, and well, this is really awesome. I think this Quarkus dev is really the thing that sets Quarkus apart from Micronaut and Spring Boot. Spring Boot also has its development tool, but in my opinion, it's nowhere near as good as the Quarkus dev tools. And similar to Spring, you can also use code.quarkus.io and select the extensions from there and download the resulting zip file. Well, with Spring, I would advise you to do that, and on the Quarkus side, I would advise you to use the Quarkus Maven plugin to bootstrap your application. But as a yeah, well, so let's take a look at the features of each of the frameworks. And I'd like to take a look at 4 parts of them. First of all, the language support, the framework support, the shell integration. Well, already touched that part for a bit, and Kubernetes support, because well, that was one of the things that Quarkus added to. They wanted to be cloud native from the start. So something you have to look at. So if when we're looking at the language support, basically, well, all frameworks support Java, which is not a surprise, really. The Groovy support is not. There's no Groovy support in Quarkus. I don't know if that's by design. I think there is a ticket for it to be added, but it's not currently supported. And of course, Micronaut coming from the Grails and Groovy. Many people are still using Scala. I tried to get to grips with Scala, and because at some time I wanted to learn functional programming, and wow, Scala is really cool. But Scala, well, at least in our country, in the Netherlands, that's where I live, Scala never really took off, contrary to Kotlin. Groovy also didn't really take off, by the way. So in this case, Quarkus appears to support Scala, and Spring Boot also, but Micronaut doesn't. So if you check this out, then basically Spring Boot is the clear winner here, where well, yeah, Micronaut supports Groovy, and Quarkus supports Scala. Well, yeah, you have to choose, and I think, well, looking from my perspective, Groovy used to be more popular than Scala, so that's why I say that. Why I would say that Micronaut comes second here, is the runner-up to Quarkus, which is third in this aspect. So looking at framework support, well, none of these frameworks are supported in Java and Jakarta EE. Quarkus is the only that implements and is certified for the Eclipse micro profile specification, which I think is really cool because it's one of the, in my opinion, well, everything I say today in this session will be opinionated. In my opinion, it's really cool that it's micro profile certified. At least that's something that helps organizations to select a tool. They want to know, wow, this is certified. This got to be good, you know. And micro profile is in our country, it's really taking off as something that is short, that is very useful in the microservices area. So that's why I think that that Quarkus is micro profile certified is really cool, and also implements the reactive messaging specification, which is one of my favorite specifications when you're working in the microservice area. When you look at but from the micro profile perspective, there are also a lot of sub-specifications, because micro profile is really an umbrella specification on top of other specifications. So all of these, all of the frameworks, Micronaut, Quarkus, and Spring Boot, they all support CDI, and they all support JSON P and JSON binding. Quarkus prefers REST easy, but it also has the JSON P support. And JAX-RS are also supported by all the frameworks, and JSON Web Token are also supported. So basically, most of the important specifications which are in the micro profile umbrella specification are supported by all of these frameworks. And also reactive messaging is supported by all of the frameworks, where Quarkus is different in the sense that it is a micro profile reactive messaging specification. And Micronaut and Spring Boot, they use a project reactor, which is basically something that that has existed a long time already, and is definitely and is very production solid and absolutely good to go. So in all of these cases, well, as I said, none of them support Java Jakarta EE specification. None of them are certified. Quarkus is certified across the micro profile spec, and that makes it the winner, with Spring Boot and Micronaut a runner-up, if you look at the framework support. So it's really, it's officially passed the TCK, which is, I think, cool. And in November last year, it was in progress, and now it's officially. So it's really cool, I believe. So let's take a look at Spring dependency injection compatibility. From the perspective here in the Netherlands, that Spring is really important, and we have a lot of libraries that use Spring under the hood. So that's why Quarkus provides a Spring compatibility extension, and it does support all the Spring annotations, such as add auto-wired with a qualifier, add component, add value, but it does not start a Spring application context, and it will not run any Spring infrastructure classes. So if you are going to use, if you want to use your existing Spring libraries, then you have to bootstrap the infrastructure yourself. So yeah, basically the classes and annotations are only used to read the metadata, and they are used as the parameter types and return types and whatever. So basically, if you add an arbitrary Spring library, it will not have any effect, in the sense that that it will not start up, because it doesn't bootstrap a Spring framework. So that is an area where Spring itself, of course, and Micronaut definitely have the upper hand over Quarkus, although it does have this extension. So Micronaut does have the integration for Spring compatibility, and it has the Spring Boot annotations and support for the controllers. And you can even use Micronaut as a parent application contact. But the question is, of course, how much Spring do you need if you build your own application? This is mostly relevant if you have existing Spring applications and you don't have the resources or the time or money. Yeah, everything comes down to money to convert your application either to Micronaut or to Quarkus if you want to go that way. So taking a short look at the command line tools. So if we put them together, then Micronaut does not have a development plugin for Maven, so you cannot run the application, you cannot do hot reload. Quarkus supports both of them with the Maven Quarkus Dev plugin, and Spring Boot, you can easily run an application with the Maven plugin. And even, of course, there's the Maven exec that works, and there is also you have the Spring Dev tools, but as far as I know, they don't do hot reload of the entire application. So basically, you'll have to restart the application very often. At least that's something that I found out with the Camel applications where I'm using the Spring Boot DevTools, and I have to restart it every time I change something in my Camel configuration. So the command line tools, well, Micronaut has Gradle support in its command. Quarkus doesn't, Spring Boot does. So at least Quarkus doesn't officially have a Gradle support. It does have it in pre-release stage. And shell support, well, you cannot, you can create a new project with Micronaut. You can also modify it. With Quarkus, you have to use the Quarkus Maven plugin. But you can modify your project with the Quarkus Maven plugin if you like. So you can add the extensions and you can do some of the more simplistic tasks. So this is where Micronaut, the CLI is definitely much better. And Spring Boot, well, you can create a new project with the Spring Boot CLI. You cannot modify it, and as I said, this creating a new project has no added value over the Spring Initializer project. Yeah. Well, I think, well, this hot reload thing, yeah, this is really awesome, and that's why I would personally say that this is the winner. This hot reload has saved me a lot of time in my application development when I worked on reactive messaging applications. So I think even though Micronaut has this fantastic shell support, well, I think that the hot reload is much more important than this extensive CLI, because in the end, well, what I've learned from using CLIs is that you usually start with a CLI, and when you're not really familiar yet with the framework, then you use the shell support to modify a project and add classes. But in the end, you will almost always either create a new class and add the interfaces yourself, and in the end, that works faster, in my opinion. So that's why I believe that when you take a look at the command line tools, it's really the hot reload and the Quarkus Dev plugin that sets Quarkus apart from Micronaut and Spring Boot. So let's take a look at the cloud Kubernetes support in these frameworks. So native compilation is supported by Micronaut and Quarkus when you want to build a Docker image. The Docker build has to build a Docker image, of course. And you cannot, as far as I know, Spring Boot still doesn't support GraalVM. At least every time I run a Spring Boot application, I still get the Spring Reflect utils warnings in Java 11. And Micronaut and Quarkus, you can do it. But there's this thing that you have to take a look at if you're building Docker images in Docker, in the sense that I've created native applications with Quarkus using Maven, but I didn't do it initially in a Docker image. And the thing is, then you're building a native image for the framework, for the operating system you're running on. So in my case, I created an executable for the for my MacBook, And when I tried to add that to a Docker image, then unsurprisingly, that just didn't work. So you can use you can do that in a build infrastructure if you have like Jenkins or GitLab running on Linux. Then you can use then you can build the native images on the server. Otherwise, you'll have to build it inside a Docker image, which is really something that you have to be aware of. Yeah, despite the fact that Quarkus said that they wanted to be a cloud native, etc., in my opinion, it's still Micronaut that has the upper hand here, where it has a support for reading config maps and secrets inside Micronaut itself, which both Quarkus and Spring Boot don't, although you can work around it, of course, by either let me see. For Quarkus, you can use the microprofile config, which has some support under the hood, and Spring Boot, you'll have to map it in. That's basically it. And the same with the Kubernetes service discovery. In Micronaut, clients can even discover Kubernetes services, which, as far as I know, is not possible in Quarkus or Spring Boot. And so even though Quarkus said, oh, we want to be cloud native and ready and all this stuff, I think that the cloud and Kubernetes support, it's really Micronaut that still has the upper hand in all aspects. There's another thing that I want to take a look at, and it's called enterprise integration. Because in the Netherlands, where I live, enterprise integration is still one of the things that is really important. And as far as I know, Apache Camel is really the de facto standard here, which allows you to integrate and it has support for all the enterprise integration patterns. So it's really the de facto standard in this case. And if we're looking at the frames, that Spring Boot really is supported by Camel itself. So Camel has the Spring Boot. I don't know exactly, but every Camel version, which is currently 3.4.0, which is the new long-term support released, has support for Spring Boot in it. Quarkus provides a Camel Quarkus extension. And there's something really, I think this is really cool, actually. I really love this extension. And most of the integration components in Camel are already supported. And what this Camel Quarkus extension does is that it really, it's taking a look under the hood what the components do. And so it also works with a native compilation, which is just absolutely amazing. But not all Camel components are supported yet. And the thing that I personally am missing for the company, the organization that I'm currently working for, which is the Dutch Ministry of Justice and Security, is that it doesn't have support for SOAP over HTTP. And I think Quarkus, as far as I know, doesn't have support at all for SOAP over HTTP. So if you need that, then well, then you're basically stuck with Spring. Oh, sorry about that. Oh dear, really messing it up right now. What I wanted to say here, but that's the bullet that's missing, is Micronaut does not officially support Camel. It is supposed to run, so it probably will run, but it will not run with a ground VM. So it's never going to be optimized for Micronaut. Whereas with Quarkus, with the Quarkus Camel Quarkus extension, you do have this native compilation with ground VM, which is really amazing. Unless you need the SOAP over HTTP, which is by Camel. Camel supports the CXF for that. So Apache CXF, which has all which supports web service security and everything you will ever need when you need a SOAP enterprise integration. And for all other types of enterprise integration, then Quarkus would be best. And if you need SOAP over HTTP, then you should select Spring Boot. And and Micronaut unfortunately doesn't support Camel, so not that much enterprise integration support in Micronaut. So summing this all up, So Quarkus is microprofile 3.1, 3.2 certified, not 2.2. And it has this hot code replacement. Micronaut has the best Kubernetes support. And Spring Boot, well, of course, well, it's familiar to everyone. We in the Netherlands, well, Spring Boot is about everywhere. It definitely has the best language and framework support across the board. It's the only one that supports Camel with SOAP over HTTP. Well, there's no clear winner as far as I'm concerned here. Yeah, they all have their pieces, so and then their advantages. Well, take a look at this developer friendliness, where Quarkus is supposed to be so good at. Well, for me to be developer friendly, you have to have a couple of things. At least you have to have good documentation. You have to have IDE support and examples. Well, yeah, Stack Overflow. Well, that's something where many of us, I presume, are looking when we want to have. So we need to have a lot of information on the Stack Overflow. And for productivity, well, I love this hot code replacement, which we used to have with. I once worked for a company and they used JRebel, which was really fantastic. And there used to be this DCEVM, which is something that also supported hot code replacement with Spring, but it's no longer developed anymore. So JRebel and single configuration, that helps with the productivity. So looking at all these aspects, well, documentation, as far as I think, they're really similar. They all have very, very good documentation. I think for the IDE support, Spring Boot is definitely the winner here. I'm an IntelliJ addict, and I know that the latest version of IntelliJ does have some support for Quarkus. I haven't tried it out yet. I must admit, I only downloaded it, I think, yesterday or the day before yesterday. So hopefully that's improved, but the IDE support was definitely Spring. And with examples, well, I think they're mostly similar. They all have very good examples. And of Stack Overflow, well, I think that that Spring Boot has information on Stack Overflow. But there's also this thing with Stack Overflow that you have to be aware of. So take a look at the age of when an accepted answer was specified. Still remember this case. Something you have to be aware of is there was a presentation that I attended, and there was this guy I have, which was about security, and he worked across, well, I think 10 examples from Stack Overflow, and they all had like this example where they either disabled security features and all sorts of things. So when you're checking out things from Stack Overflow, do take a look at the age and think if it's really the solution you need. And when you look at the productivity aspect, well, I think this hot code replacement stuff is really awesome. So no surprise that I think that on the developer friendliness, well, Quarkus wins on that base, and IDE support, Spring Boot. Well, if these various build types with Quarkus, that's something that really struck me the first time that I started working with Quarkus. Let me see. So basically, the native image, that's exactly what I told you a couple of slides ago. Well, you can create a packet with a native, and you can also do cross-compilation. And this is the thing. So native image Docker build is true, or you can use a multi-stage Docker build. Well, yeah, you can ask yourself, what's the difference between these two? Well, I already gave one spoiler away, is that if you build a native image, you're building it for your local machine. So if you're on a MacBook and you're building a native image, and you can only run it on a MacBook. And the same with Windows, of course. So let's just take a look at, well, this is, I hope this works actually. This is something that, yeah, so let's just take a look. Well, this is really in real time, and I test the code and it works. take a look again because there's something really, really weird going on. Hold on for a sec. So basically, yeah, okay. Now, hopefully you can see this as well. So I'm typing Macron compiled Quarkus dev. That's something I didn't see on live screen, so that was why I was really surprised. So now it's running, and it says, well, Quarkus is started in so many seconds, and then I am typing something. Hopefully. See if this works. Okay, so I'm using is as I'm in a terminal. I type HTTP :8080/fetch, which is basically I'm using HTTP here, which is my favorite tool for REST for testing REST endpoints, and you can see that it works. I hope that it's visible also when you're streaming it. But this well, the application works right now. So HTTP is really, if you ever want to test, this much more useful than Perl because you have like this syntax completion. You also have color coding and all sorts of stuff. So it supports JSON. So the code is okay. Now let me see if this. I want to add a new class. In this case, I'm adding the pet resource class. So new Java class. Yes. So I've added this class. Okay, cool. So basically, and now I want to create a new resource to list all pets in. So at the /pets class. That's basically what it does. Okay, so. And now I'm using HTTP again, HTTP :8080/pets. And say, oh dear, I hate it. It doesn't work. And I get this horrible exception or Eclipse or whatever something. Oh dear, it doesn't work. So let me now see if I can fix the code. So what I have to do is something here, is basically there's this many to one, and here's another many to one with the join column, but I need to specify this thing as JSON transient, and also the set of visit because it has a back reference to another class, and that's the reason that we get like an stack recursion error. So let me see if yeah. And this is basically the fix. So I have to add like this add JSON be transient in these two, and that fixes the code. So that's something that I think that's really awesome with this hot code replacement stuff. So if you try to do it, this is really fantastic. Let me just show you how you create a native effect. I've fast forwarded because it took me like 4 minutes. To do that. So let's have a look at the cross-compile build, how long that takes. But I've also fast forwarded because otherwise you'd have to sit here for a long time. I haven't recreated this. As you can see, this was version 0.23, which was just before Quarkus went stable. And this build took me 30 minutes. So this is the cross-compile build. So that's really something that you want to do in the Jenkins in the CI/CD environment, and you don't want to do this every time on your laptop. So developer friendly, yes, but you have to build with care in the sense that don't do it on your laptop because it takes far too long. and it's supposed to work. It's supposed to work. Another thing is, which is important, of course, is if things are production ready. And to be production ready, you have to be, well, the code has to be stable, has to be secure, so decent sets of patches, and in my opinion, the community has to be active. So there have to be updates. And the nice thing to have is community and potentially support contracts. That depends on the organization where you're working. So in the Netherlands, we have a couple of commercial organizations that really don't care about support contracts, and all we need is community support. And we also have, like, well, that's usually government, where they I need to be covered, you know. And when my manager, so that's when people want support contracts. What I call the cover your, your hindsight, zeg maar. Yeah. So if you look at this, well, stable. Well, they're all stable, of course. They're all really active currently. Micronaut just released version 2.0, recently 2.01. I think there's a big community behind Quarkus, and there's also a huge community behind Spring, as we all know. Red Hat does the commercial support for Quarkus if you ever need it, and VMware does the support for Spring. So Pivotal, of course, I'm sorry. Pivotal does the support for Spring, and Micronaut, well, I've learned that the creator of Micronaut has been contracted by Oracle, so you'll probably see support contracts for Micronaut sooner rather than later. Well, let's take a look at performance timing as well. So startup time of an application in Micronaut and Quarkus is, well, it's about the same. Spring Boot is still slower, but they've also it's about 1.5 times as slow, but it has improved actually a lot over the last Spring Boot releases. And the average request time after a warm-up, well, if you look at this, you see that most of them, they're really similar here. So Quarkus native is really fast, and also the native is really fast. Also Spring Boot, what really surprised me is that after warm-up, that Spring Boot is really super fast as well. So that's something that really struck me originally. I hadn't expected that to be as fast as Quarkus native after a warm-up. So let's just have a look at the high scores overall. So in my opinion, you should choose Quarkus if you really need these native images and you want to do GraalVM, Docker, Kubernetes things, and especially for function as a service application. So function as a service is basically when you want to just execute the application and immediately exit it. So the Lambda type functions from Amazon, AWS Lambda, then you really, well, I think that you should use Quarkus if you want to do this type of thing. Even though I have to say that the Kubernetes support in Quarkus is not as good as it is in Micronaut. But at Quarkus you have to, if you can handle living on the bleeding edge, because it has really these frequent, and that sometimes there were really about weekly updates of the Quarkus version, and at that time it really drove me mad, to be honest. And of course you have to trust Red Hat, which is now a subsidiary of IBM. Well, you can also choose Micronaut if you need the native images. Sorry, because it also has very good GraalVM compilation support, and but you cannot handle this living on the bleeding edge, and you want less frequent updates. So I do want to have a look at my applications that have that I need to migrate from Micronaut 1 to Micronaut 2, in the sense that if they are still running, I haven't checked that yet. But if you cannot handle this living on the bleeding edge, or you don't want to have these very, very frequent updates, then Micronaut is really an awesome framework as well. Or if you need something special, of course, like this. Well, Gradle isn't really special, although in the Netherlands it never really took off compared to Maven. So if you need this Groovy support, and you can also choose Spring Boot if you don't need all these native images, hot reloading thing, or if you have a JRebel license, or you're still on Java 8 and you can use DCE which is, yeah. Or if you still rely on, heaven forbid, JDK7 or older, because Micronaut and Quarkus both only support Java 8, and I think the next release of Quarkus will only support Java 11 and up. And although this reflection, it is possible to work around it, of course, in the Quarkus, but you have to write special code for it. So if you rely on JDK7 or reflection, then you're almost stuck. You have to use a Spring Boot. Or if you're using Spring-specific frameworks, or if you want to do enterprise integration with SOAP over HTTP, so if Camel Quarkus isn't good enough for you, then or you use Spring-specific frameworks, then you should use Spring Boot. Or you just want to be safe, I mean, Spring Boot is really good, actually. It's not, well, there's good reason that many companies are dependent upon Spring. It's just that it's really good. Also, the project Reactor and Spring Cloud Stream, they're really good. Although I personally like the Eclipse micro profile reactive messaging specification, the implementation is still quite new. So if you want to be safe, use Spring Boot. Wrapping it all up, you have to do what works for you. And now I hope that there's still ample time for questions, so I'll take a look at that right now.
Hello, Eric. Thank you all for your presentation. Thank you for the presentation. So if you wanted to take a look on the Q&A, I can read for you. You can read it yourself. I mean, whatever works for you. Can you hear me? I think you're on mute, Eric. You muted yourself. I see you're still on mute. Fine. Yeah, let's just give it a minute for Eric to see what's going on with his setup. I think maybe if you rejoin StreamYard, Eric, I think we can. Let me see if I can unmute you.
Am I no longer muted right now?
Yeah, you're
Hello?
right. You're right. So we can hear you. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Awesome. Yeah, I can hear you too.
I don't know when did you lost
No?
audio or you said that, but I was just saying thank you, well for your presentation.
Okay.
So let's go over the Q&A. I mean, we can go over the Q&A with some questions.
Yeah, I'm going to. So, what's the difference? This is first question, right? From the Ranza, and is asking, what's the difference between microprofile, Micronaut, and Quarkus? Okay, so microprofile is a specification which is basically a subset from Java EE. Micronaut and Quarkus. Okay, so Micronaut is a framework in the same sense as Quarkus is a framework. So it's a Java library, and Spring Boot is also a library. So Microprofile is a subset of Java EE, and it's currently hosted by the Eclipse Foundation. So that's really the odd one out. So you can compare, in the sense of frameworks, you can compare Micronaut, Quarkus, and Spring Boot. So hopefully that helps. Conrad asked, do you think that Quarkus and Micronaut will replace Spring Boot? No, I don't think it will actually, because Spring Boot is still too, well, I said there are often good reasons to use Spring Boot. In the sense of frameworks, you can compare
Eric, I think you need to unmute
hopefully that
the pipe. If you unmute the pipe, because there's a delay between them. There's a delay between these three.
Spring authors can optimize their frameworks to eliminate reflection and be as efficient as Quarkus and Micronaut. Well, they've tried a lot, and I think, yeah, well, in the end they will, of course. But from the fact that with Java 11 after, well, I think the current Spring version 5.2, that they still haven't managed it. Well, that really disappointed me a bit. So in the end, they definitely will, and they're working on it. But I reckon that it will take some time, and in the end they probably will be a bit side along. But as long as not all the frameworks can be efficiently compiled into native images. Why Spring has a cold start, asks Sai Krishna. What implementation technically is Micronaut and Quarkus providing to reduce this? So Spring starts up slowly because it does all this reflection at the application context startup. And Micronaut and Quarkus, they basically do this during compile time. So let me see. I think that I've heard in this presentation, I've heard Graham Rosher tell exactly what he did, but I forgot. But it's basically being, yeah, I know. Micronaut is basically creating subclasses with CGLib, sort of proxy classes for every reflection action, and Quarkus is doing it differently. Quarkus is doing it in the extension, basically. So they have all taken their specific approach, but the reason that Spring has this slow cold start is this reflection thing. Nutish asks, how difficult is it to move code from Spring Boot to Micronaut or Quarkus? From Spring Boot to Micronaut, it tends to be pretty easy. Because they have most of the similar libraries. From Spring Boot to Quarkus took me a longer time, and it had to do with I had like a Hibernate Spring Boot application. I want to move to Quarkus, and Quarkus also has like Panache, and which is basically a framework on top of Hibernate. A lot like the Grails ORM, the GORM thing with the dynamic finders, which you can also find in the Spring data project, I think. So if you have a how difficult is it to move code? Well, the less libraries you have, the simpler. But if you use specifics, then it will take longer. Umar asks, does Quarkus have a good community support? Yes, absolutely. There's an immensely active community behind Quarkus. And in which cases will you prefer to use Micronaut or Quarkus over Spring? I think I covered that in my sheet. So basically, I would say I would use Quarkus and Micronaut, especially if you need if you have a good use case for the Lambda kind of function where you have to have this fast cold start, and you're better off with Spring if you need the things that Micronaut or Quarkus cannot provide, such as the SOAP over HTTP, for example, which is something that is still very common, of course. Is there a public Slack link for the whole event? Well, I think that the community organizers can that they are. I think there is, but ask the organizers of the event for that. The next question from Radu is: what are the current issues, if any, with GraalVM, and what is the future with GraalVM? The current issues with GraalVM. I think that GraalVM has a really bright future ahead because it's really used a lot. I know that Twitter already is based on the GraalVM. They were one of the really early adopters of GraalVM, and I think I would not be surprised if Amazon uses it under the hood as well. And current issues, well, the things are still the reflection-based kind of things. What Ismail Nori asked the question: what some topics to learn to start with a Spring Boot Quarkus? Can you share some book titles? Well, I can share the links. I don't have like you have for Spring. There are a lot of books, of course, but for Spring Boot, that's more dependent on what kind of library, what kind of application do you want to build. So if you're a full stack developer, so I am guessing, but that's just a guess, that you want to build like a REST-based web application where with a, for example, an Angular or a React type front end. Then basically, well, what I would advise you for Quarkus and Micronaut is just use the manual, because they have really good examples there. So just take a look at quarkus.io or micronaut.io. And for Spring Boot, that's more difficult. Where would I look for Spring Boot? I'll have a look and I'll see if I can post a topic.
Yeah, if you can share your slides with your further information, I think we are at the topic.
The same thing that the original executables that you have on Windows. So msword.exe, well, a native image is an executable that you can just run on your machine. Instead of so that basically combines all the functionality in the Java class files. I'm almost out of time, I reckon. So that was a good presentation. Thank you, Miranza. I will share the slides, of course. What about PHP support? It's not there. We can use, you can build Micronaut to build any application with a Spring Boot, yes, and Quarkus as well, except you cannot use SOAP over HTTP. Does Quarkus use RxJava? No, Quarkus uses microprofile reactive messaging, and it's compatible. That's it.
Wow.
I'm out of time.
Oh, wow. You read it all. Read it all. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for your awesome presentation and answering all the questions that we had. We're going to have a minute break now because we need to switch gears over here. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, well, for presentation. And that's a nice presentation on Quarkus, Spring Boot, and Micronaut. Oh, wow. You read it all. Read it all. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and answering all the questions that we had. We're going to have a minute break now because we need to switch gears over here. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, well.
Yeah, okay. Goodbye. Thank you all. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. So, awesome. That was a really nice presentation on Eric. I spent all my Dutch, I mean, all my 2 words Dutch that I had with Eric. And I think we covered everything that was on Q&A session. I think there's something else on chat. So, okay, we need to switch gears. We're going to have a technical minute break, and then we're going to have Radovan, really nice guy that I had the pleasure to meet in person. So, thank you, and see you changing links now.